Hello, my friends. Let's start with the fact that Zelenskyy once again said that a massive strike across all of Ukraine is being prepared.
We know that the Russians are preparing for another attack. Intelligence is providing information about this. Right now, America, Europe, and all partners need to understand how every Russian strike discredits diplomatic talks.
Also, today, Rubio stated that another round of talks will take place on February 1st and that they can already be described as bilateral talks between Ukraine and Russia. Vitkov and Kushner will not be present. According to him, US participation is possible, but it will not involve President Trump's special envoys. The US Secretary of State also called the issue of Donbass very difficult and said it remains the final point that still needs to be agreed upon. But everyone understands perfectly well that each side is standing its ground, and the issues of territories and the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant remain unresolved, just as before. Meanwhile, on the front line, the situation in some directions is deteriorating sharply. So today we'll probably start right away with the Pokrovsk direction. Here, the Russians continue assaulting Rodynske, pushing toward the village of Hryshyne, the outskirts of Pokrovsk, and along the western flank. But last night, information emerged that a large section of Pokrovsk Pavlohrad highway is already under fire from Russian drones. Friends, to make this clear, you can see on the map where the village of Dmitrivka is located. It turns out that the distance from Pokrovsk to this village is about 65 kilometers, and this entire stretch of the highway is already being targeted. So, what do you think of that? The Russians have made very strong advances in unmanned systems and are tightly controlling logistics, which could lead to major losses in the near future. It's no coincidence that everyone is talking about this today. As we can see, the situation is worsening significantly. In fact, the Russians are not capturing territory, but moving through it has already become dangerous. Accordingly, we can say that the gray zone is expanding on a massive scale, and this is only the beginning. Each time they increase both the range and production of unmanned aerial vehicles, and soon the situation may not be limited to just this direction. Meanwhile, in the Novopavlivka area, the Russians are currently assaulting only Filia and have had no success, so the front line there remains stable. In the direction of the settlement of Pokrovsk, in the Dnipropetrovsk region, the Russians continue shelling and are pushing through the fields near Novoalexandrivka. However, there are no changes here either. In the Huliaipole direction, activity is extremely high. The Russians are assaulting the village of Zaporizhzhia, pushing past Dobropillia, Zelene, and Dorozhnyanka, and attacking the outskirts of the city. There is also a massive amount of shelling here. It's clear that the Russians are sparing no resources in an attempt to break through the defenses and move westward toward Zaporizhzhia as quickly as possible. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians are assaulting Primorsk and carrying out shelling. But serious problems are also emerging here. What's striking is that these problems exist, yet for some reason almost no one is talking about them. Only Ukrainian forces soldiers report privately that Russian forces are already being eliminated in the village of Novoyakovlivka. destruction of Russian forward position in Novoyakovlivka, Zaporizhzhia direction. The line of contact in this section of the front is being clarified. So as we can see, the Russians are already managing to break into new villages. This is a sign that there is no continuous defensive line here, and that Russian forces are being destroyed inside villages as soon as they are detected. Accordingly, the advance toward Zaporizhzhia continues. In the Kherson direction, the Russians have so far failed to advance to the right bank, and the front line remains unchanged. Now let's move on to the situation in the Dobropillia area. Here, the Russians are breaking through toward Torske, assaulting Sofiivka, and advancing toward the town of Bielsk. The gray zone has already expanded, but the Ukrainian forces are not allowing them to consolidate on new positions. In the Kostiantynivka direction, the Russians continue to assault the outskirts of the city and Plashiivka. Activity is high, but so far they still cannot make any further progress. In the Sloviansk direction, the Russians are advancing beyond Dronivka, Fedorivka, and toward the village of Nikiforivka. Ukrainian forces reported that the Russians have changed their tactics once again. Sloviansk direction. In this area, the Russians are altering the approach and increasingly avoiding direct pressure. The main focus is to bypass the dominant heights south of the Kidne. They are not attacking head-on, but moving through ravines and faults in the terrain, using the relief as natural cover. This is effectively an attempt to infiltrate behind our garrison without fully consolidating, but the vector of movement is dangerous and requires constant monitoring. This is a slow, patient effort. At the same time, slow advances are being recorded to the southeast of Ozerne. The Russians are probing approaches and have already reached the western bank of the Siversky Donets, closer to the Moskvina Lake area. Reaching the water obstacle doesn't change the purpose. They are not moving there for show. The goal remains the same: find ways to approach Kryva Luka from advantageous directions with minimal losses. Thus, the Russians are trying to find ways to advance further. In the Lyman direction, the Russians are breaking through in the Zarychny area and assaulting Drobosheva. However, so far they cannot make further progress, and the front line remains unchanged. A photo has also appeared online of a Lancet drone caught on an anti-drone net. Izum Slovyansk route, an unexploded Lancet hangs on the anti-drone net near the turn at Глибока Makatiha. In the Borova direction, the Russians are assaulting Novoyegorivka. The activity is minimal and there are no changes. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are advancing toward Kupiansk and assaulting Petropavlovka. As for Kupiansk-Vuzlovy, the Russians have made no progress there, so the front line remains unchanged. Only shelling continues in that area. In the Velykyi Burluk area, things are quiet for now. No new assaults have been recorded, and the front line remains stable. In the Vovchansk area, the situation is expected to worsen because Ukrainian soldiers report that the Russians are sending a large number of reserves here for offensive actions. They will likely try to break through the front and start active movements. So far, the Russians are trying to consolidate in Hryshyne and are assaulting Vovchansk Hutory, but no changes have occurred over the past day. In the Kharkiv direction, at the time this report was made, no new shelling has been reported, and the front line remains stable. However, due to the train strike in the Kharkiv region, several rail services will be temporarily limited. Due to increased Russian strikes, Ukrzaliznytsia is temporarily limiting some train services in Kharkiv region. Transfer bus routes will be organized for passengers. Some long-distance routes will be replaced with city train connections. Passengers will be informed individually about route changes. In frontline areas and sections with higher risks, a special traffic regime will apply. Unscheduled stops and delays are possible, especially from Kharkiv, Sumy, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson regions. Ukrzaliznytsia asks passengers to allow extra travel time for safety reasons. Thus, an increasing number of areas are facing restrictions due to Russian attacks. In the Sumy direction, the Russians continue shelling Sumy, but no new assaults have been carried out, and the front line remains stable. Uh, Meanwhile, Trump issued an ultimatum to Iran. Time is running out. Trump issued an ultimatum to Iran amid the deployment of the US fleet. President Donald Trump warned Iran that a nuclear deal with the US must be reached or military strikes could follow. The president stated that he has sent a US naval fleet to the region, led by the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln. According to Trump, the fleet is ready, willing, and capable of quickly executing its mission with force if necessary. Overall, we wait to see how events will develop. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.